Hello, all, and welcome back to a new episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we are going to be reviewing quite an iconic film. And so, of course, we can't do it alone. We've got to be joined by some special guests, Frankie and Scott. Frankie and Scott, do you want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Frankie.
And I'm Scott.
And we have a podcast called Shoot the Flick, wherever pods are casted, if you want to check us out. But basically, we are a husband and wife duo who enjoy introducing each other to new movies. So we're also about connecting through cinema.
Love that. Love that. We're about that as well. And we're about to do lots of that as we talk about The Empire Strikes Back. Yes, indeed. The internet has had thoughts and thoughts and thoughts about this film, so we're going to add ours again here now, 45 years after the release of this film. We figured it'd be such a great time to celebrate kind of the anniversary of this film and revisit this iconic movie. So, Sarah, do you want to kick us off with an IMDb summary for The Empire Strikes Back?
Sure. After the Empire overpowers the Rebel Alliance, Luke Skywalker begins training with Jedi Master Yoda, while Darth Vader and bounty hunter Boba Fett pursue his friends across the galaxy.
All right. So before we dive in and do our one-sentence summaries and to start talking about this movie, I think it'd be helpful to hear, like, everyone's relationship with Star Wars. Are you, like, a super fan? You've got all the figurines and everything, and you've watched all of the new shows? Or are you, like, people talk about this whole franchise too much, I'm sick of it. So where do you fall on the spectrum?
Do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
Since you're probably, I would guess, the biggest nerd here. Yeah, let's start with you.
That's probably true. So I've watched every Star Wars movie multiple times, a lot of times. I've played the games a lot. I've read the comics. I've watched shows. I'm a little behind on the TV shows just because
they're not that great.
They're fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been a Star Wars fan for so long. I've even showed Frankie the holiday special.
Yes, we've talked about that. We've talked about all, like, the main Star Wars movies, including the special on our show as well. But yeah, because before Scott and I got together, I was like, well, I know what Star Wars is. I don't really need to watch the movies. I'm good. Like, I got it. Because by that point, it's so in pop culture, just like osmosis. You get the gist. Like, do you really need to watch the movies? But then the sequels were coming out, so I'm like, okay, I guess let's watch all the movies. But yeah, I've seen all the movies. I've watched some of the shows, and I don't play video games. So yeah, I would consider myself a mid-tier Star Wars fan.
Nice. Good job on converting her from not having watched to, like, mid-tier fan. That's fabulous. Yes. Sarah, what about you?
Yeah, I grew up watching the original trilogy. I saw the prequels in theaters when they came out, like that whole thing. So I have been a Star Wars fan.
Sorry.
I know. Here's the thing. I was still so young. I was still such a child that I was like, oh my God, Star Wars is great. I love these movies. I didn't know what I was talking about. I was too young.
The baby.
I was just a baby. I didn't know any better. But yeah, I've enjoyed these movies my whole life. I would not say that I am a super fan, but I have an affection for Star Wars, especially the prequels or the original trilogy.
Yes.
Oh, I was about to say, oh my gosh, hot take. Let's dive into that, Sarah.
No, the prequels are just, those should not be a thing.
What?
The original trilogy, though,
wait,
great.
You're about to set him off. Go ahead, honey.
Well,
Revenge of the Sith isn't that bad.
No, okay. I can get into a rant. I don't want to just steal the show.
Let's not scare the girls. We're just meeting them.
Pop off. No,
don't wanna
we're
scare
here
them.
for
No,
all
go
of the
for it.
passionate opinions.
No, like, I gladly admit the prequels have a ton of problems, but there are really good things too. And I just, as much as again, it's a mixed bag. Prequels or sequels are, I think if you look positively, you can find a lot of good in those 6 movies. Even if you are original trilogy people.
Little mouse somewhere here in the virtual recording room.
Sound. My bad.
I love it. It's so funny. Yeah, I think I fall probably most where Frankie you are, which is like I like these movies. I watch them much later on in life, and so by that time I'm like all of the big like plot twists I already knew. At that point I like felt like I watched the movies even though I hadn't, because they're just everywhere. Halloween, everyone is one of the characters at some point around you growing up. So it was in college when we did like a big movie marathon. We stayed up like for a full night to just like marathon all 6 of these movies, which was so fun. And so I felt like I was like steeped in this world and really loved these movies. But I then meet people like Scott, and then I'm like, okay, never mind. Like they're like they can name all of the ships and all of the planets, and I'm like, okay, yep. Not at that level.
And the sad part is, I'm not the worst there is.
No, you're definitely not the worst there is. You have friends that are worse. Like can name every planet, every character. Like we've had we'll talk about it, I guess, as we go in, but we've had conversations in the past about Wedge Antilles and his importance to the whole Star Wars universe. And I don't think there is any, but Scott would disagree.
What?
And you're just in the corner, just like
Antilles backstory movie.
Eating the chips. You're just like, okay, just let me entertain myself while they do their thing. Okay, well, let's dive in and talk about Empire Strikes Back. Let's start off with our one-sentence summaries in Movies Nest tradition, shall we? So, do y'all want to share your one-sentence summaries first as our guest?
Do you want me to go first?
You can go first.
Okay, because I wrote mine down.
Yes, I wrote mine down too.
Oh, okay, because 10 minutes ago you were like, no, I have it in my head. So I wrote, Luke begins his Jedi training, led by the infamous Miss Piggy disguised as an old green alien man, while Han and Leia evade the Empire, asteroid fields, and any form of true emotional vulnerability.
No, that's wrong.
Wow, clap. That was well done. That took me on a journey.
You told me run-on sentences were allowed, so I figured
Oh, yes.
that was a bit of a hefty one.
Oh, so good. So good. All right. Scott, what about you?
Despite everything going wrong in the galaxy, there is still hope.
Ugh. What a nerdy
Yeah.
sentence.
So good. So good.
Yeah, I love the optimism. It's so nice.
It's very optimistic.
Mm.
We love that.
I needed that.
We need that.
We need that in this day and age, Yeah. Sarah, what's yours?
Mine is, given to the Empire, you must not.
Perfect.
That's cute.
Mine is, nailing a middle movie in a trilogy like this is impressive. Most impressive.
All good
Yes.
answers.
Yeah, it really is.
All right, well, let's dive in. As we mentioned, we're celebrating the 45-year anniversary birthday of this movie. So it's been 45 years. We're going to give our very high-level, quick roundtable, like, temperature thoughts about this film. And then we're diving fully in because it's been 45 years. So I do live under a rock. So let's roundtable thoughts about The Empire Strikes Back. And I think particularly in this most recent viewing, perhaps, has anything shifted and changed in how you think about this movie compared to maybe your first viewing experience?
So nothing's really changed. This is probably close to the 100th time I've seen this movie.
That's insane.
Over my lifespan. I love it every time. I love the lines. I could probably quote a great deal of this movie if I tried. It's just a lot of fun to watch. It's the one I go back to the most.
It's probably the most well-rounded. It's got a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Even some of the behind-the-scenes stuff is always fun. Like the fact that they had to, beat up Luke's face to hide his car accident.
Oh, yeah. The whole Hoth scene was because he got in a car accident between movies, so we had to cover that up somehow. Make that make sense.
Oh.
Where does this rank on your Star Wars franchise of the movies ranking? Like, is this high, like top three?
I would say this is
first top
my
tier?
favorite one.
Middle tier?
Yeah, number one.
I'd say it's the
Wow.
best one.
Okay. Perfect.
I like Return of the Jedi too, but this one's good
Yeah.
too. I think
Yeah.
it would be between those two, like what my favorite is of the original trilogy.
Yeah. I think I'm pretty sure you go Empire, New Hope, Return of the Jedi as the original trilogy.
I have a hot take about New Hope, but I don't know. I don't really.
Share
it's
it.
kind of
I love hot
mid
take.
and boring, but that's just me. But like, don't come at me. Okay, it's fine. I'm allowed to have my opinions. I also liked friggin' The Last Jedi, so there.
Okay, that's a whole topic I would love to
That's a
touch on
lot.
at some point, which is like they are both the middle movie in trilogies and play very, I think, difficult roles, but also important roles to like build the arc and momentum, and fascinating to put them in conversation with each other. So we're going to come back to The Last Jedi, I think. And your thoughts about that. But it sounds like you liked it. Okay, Sarah, thoughts about The Empire Strikes Back, where it lands for you, recent viewing, all of that.
Yeah, it's probably been like 10 years since I last watched this. And so it was really fun to remember all of the set pieces that are in this, because there's so much and so many of them are so iconic. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's this movie. And so just being like blown away again and again by just the number of things that are in this that are so iconic. But I think, like you guys said, this is so balanced. I think it's paced really well. I love how you have your comedic bits, you have your strong action bits, and it's just a fun movie to watch. And like, no wonder it's so iconic. It's just one of those movies that you can just put on and just have a really good time with. So yeah, I had an absolute blast watching this again.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's been maybe 7 or 8 years since I've seen this movie, and I was like even more impressed by it again. I think that like we've seen a lot of like big action like franchise films as of just like the past like decade or two, and seeing how well this one is structured, it nails every emotional beat. The humor, I think, is really well done, which I think is really impressive. I was thinking a lot about the comparison of the humor in this film versus like a lot of the Marvel humor, and like some of the things that work and don't work in Marvel humor and in comparison to this one. So it was fascinating to see how much this film really nails so many aspects. There's a lot of like show don't tell moments in this movie that I think are also different from some of the more recent Star Wars movies that do a lot of talking and explaining. And so all of that, I think, yeah, I'm just, man, impressed by how well this movie is aged. It looks so good for the most part. And so, man, this is a great one. All right. Like we mentioned, it's been 45 years. We're giving you a spoiler alert, and we're going to dive fully into this movie. I'm curious, are there specific bits and moments that in a more recent viewing that really stood out to you more this time? Like you're just like, I never thought about that scene as much as I have, and I'm noticing it now for maybe the first time in a deeper way.
I would just say for me, like the more humorous scenes, particularly with Han and like the back and forth between him and Leia, like how, like you were saying before, Jen, like how timeless it really is. Like, because you think about even what you were saying about Marvel, like you think about Marvel movies that happened much more recently, and you watch them back, and some of the humor is dated and like doesn't hold up as well as the humor in this movie, which is 45 years old. And it's like it really makes you think like how well this movie really did with its humor, because it just makes up words also, but yet it's still funny and it stands the test of time.
Well, and I love that there's such a variety of humor too, and I think that also helps, because the Han type of humor is very different than like the C-3PO type of humor, and then you got Yoda just being a weird little guy causing chaos, which is funny. So like you have all of these different types of humor littered throughout. So I think that also helps it not feel stale, just hearing like one note over and over again, but that variation helps keep you engaged.
It also made me miss Puppet Yoda so much. I was like, oh,
Yes.
Puppet Yoda.
Yep.
Where'd you go, man?
The effects in this just hold up so well.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much to love about this movie, and like you can read into so many different things, especially when like Luke goes into the swamp and like confronts Vader. You have like there's so many like things to like, oh, how do we read this? Do we read that Luke is so close to maybe going to the dark side, or is it trying to hint at the familial relationship early between Luke and Vader that hadn't been known yet to when you originally watched the movie? So it's just like there's so much to like read into it, and that's kind of why people keep coming back to this series, because it is so expansive and you can read into it so many different ways. And it's kind of why I love this movie, because you have all of the thoughts of the Jedi and the Sith, and it's so much to go into.
Yeah, it's not as philosophical at this point. Later, when we get to the sequel stuff, and even the prequels, it gets a lot more philosophical. This is just like, hey, good guys, bad guys, let's have fun.
Yeah, there's so much more like, I'm thinking about so many of the scenes in like the newer sequels of just like Rey and Luke and just like them talking. There's just so much talking. There's like constantly having these like you mentioned, philosophical conversations and like waxing poetic with each other around like, what does the Force mean, and like the temptations of the dark side, which are all real. But I feel like this movie does a great job of like showing a lot of that and allowing us to experience it versus like telling us and having us like cognitively intellectualize it. So I think the example that you gave, Scott, around the helmets, like Luke seeing his face in the helmet, like that shot alone is iconic, but it also represents so much. It's the familial connection. It's also like seeing that you have the capacity for evil, and perhaps that's somehow in you in some way. Like that could have been just a whole like conversation between Luke and Yoda where he's explaining all of that, but instead we get this really dramatic scene where we get to see him feel all of the emotions of realizing that his capacity for evil, and that's part of him that he needs to wield. So I feel like that scene is like a perfect representation of like we experienced it versus we heard and listened to them philosophize about it.
Well, part of this is, so George Lucas, especially as the creator of Star Wars and the universe and everything like that, through these first 3 movies, he was still like establishing who he was as a director and a writer, and he didn't have full control of what Star Wars was to become. Like if you hear behind the scenes stuff with like Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher, where they would just laugh at some of his ideas.
It's not with his dialogue, because we find out later when he actually makes things that aren't Star Wars, we're like, whoa, maybe he needed helping hands to help him make human dialogue.
Well, because he has people like Lawrence Kasdan, who I feel like is one of the most underrated things about Star Wars, because he could like mold George Lucas to a thing. That's like why Spielberg does it with Indy too.
Mm-hmm.
Like they can kind of mold them into a direction. And then when he became bigger than life and then we got the prequels, that's where we started kind of seeing problems. And he started getting into his whole philosophy and his whole debate. And that kind of just kept going with Star Wars. Like they tried to do things like Rey seeing herself in 10,000 reflections. Like they tried to do stuff like the show Note tell.
But by then, people were just like, please release me from this torture. I'm done. I can't take it anymore.
But that's a good point, though, of like, you need a team behind these things.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that aspect of this film, too, is seeing how like Leia and Han and Chewie were like working together, and obviously they'd have these fun little spats with each other that are so interesting, but it really is this like team dynamic. We don't just have this one person off who's going to be the savior of all of the things. No, it's all of these people that are working together to do their part and to do what they can do. So I appreciate that the film really highlights the scope of everything and how you need all of these diverse people who have different skill sets to come together to make something special. It's a shame that George Lucas couldn't learn that lesson that's in his own movie.
And the sequels, I mean, forget it. By the time they sold it to Disney, Disney totally forgot what like the point of Star Wars was in a lot of ways. Oh, the dog just shook her little head. Sorry. But yeah, because like they totally forgot about the team aspect. It's the Rey show in the sequels. And then all the other amazing actors that are in that movie are just like thrown to the wayside.
Well, the sequels, the issue with a lot of the sequels is they have multiple directors who all had multiple ideas.
Well, yeah, they didn't plan it out.
And they didn't, like, have a plan.
That's a whole other can of worms.
Like, as much as you want to make fun of, like, the prequels, at least Lucas kind of had a plan of what he wanted to do.
He had a plan, but
he made mistakes.
It was insane.
And no one could be like, hey, George, can we rethink this now?
Yeah,
no, he was George Lucas.
Someone to tell him no, that's the thing. That's the original sequel. He had, like you were saying, a team. He had people guiding him. In the prequels, he was just off-road doing his own thing.
And then in the sequels, you have like battle of the screenwriter ideas and directors where like one establishes something, then the next movie undoes it, and then the third movie debunks all of that and like resets it back to the original.
I don't even want to talk about what was that one? The last Skywalker.
We don't like those ideas. Let's just write them away.
Yeah,
please.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, making everybody related is also quite annoying.
It's painful. I'm like, I can't.
Oh my
I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, but because I mean, the sequels was just a whole other. But the prequel trilogy had its own problems that were clearly defined, and then the sequel trilogy had its own problems that were clearly defined. The original trilogy, I mean, does it have does it have discernible problems, or like is it nitpicky things? Because like no movie is like really perfect. You could nitpick anything to death if you really want to. So does Empire have any like
that's a great
discernible problems in its storytelling or anything that you can pick out?
I think Empire is does it get a little meandering probably with Yoda and some of that stuff? Yeah, probably.
I don't mind the Yoda stuff. I wish the Yoda stuff went on longer and we cut off a little bit of the pew 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 in the first like 30 minutes. I'm like, okay, we get it. We're flying in the air and we're shooting things. Can we cut it down a little bit and maybe have Luke train with Yoda for 2 days instead of 1? Like, can we just do something?
Like, there are definitely things when you look at them like, yeah, can I nitpick this? Yeah, but I think Empire, the reason Empire is usually one of the top, if not the top movie of Star Wars fans, is because it probably is the closest to perfect. It is the hardest to even nitpick.
Yeah,
that's probably true.
Which, to your one-sentence summary, Jen, is really impressive for being the second movie in a trilogy. Like, how often have you heard that the second movie is arguably the best of the trilogy? Like, I feel like that's really rare and just such a testament to this film that so effectively is a bridge between the other two movies and has enough meat there and enough story for us to really sink our teeth into and feel like we went on a memorable and substantial enough journey to be satisfied with this one movie alone. Like, that is a hard thing to do, and Empire, they really pulled it off.
Yeah, because I think the middle movie in a trilogy is often the bridge point. It's like there's not the first movie gets to establish the world and like introduce you to all of your interesting characters. So that's really fun and exciting. They have like some big final set sequence. The middle movie can really easily be kind of lost. Like nothing feels like it really happens, and then you don't even get a satisfying ending sometimes the way that you do in the final third movie, because there's often these like open threads that are left to be tied up in the final third movie. And so I was feeling at the end of this movie with that way that shot lingers on our crew from behind with the music soaring and stuff. I thought that was so effective to help us have a moment to feel that feeling of everything has fundamentally changed for our crew. Like, who they thought they were at the beginning is so different in every way. And they're missing a key member of their crew. So that's an open thing for us to explore next. But like, that's exciting. But that, like, I am your father thing, Luke's world is totally shifted. Leia is also shifted. She thought she was just like a princess of a planet, but like, no, she's force sensitive. And that's a new discovery for her. And so I feel like there's so much that we go from like point A to point B in this movie that it feels satisfying, even if it's not tied up. We're like, wow, everything has changed. The game board has reset. You know, I think, and it's because of those key reveals and key like plot points that get pushed forward while still having a lot of that really fun action woven in. So I think that's where I started thinking about comparing this to The Last Jedi, because some people's critique of The Last Jedi was that I felt wandering, like what was their goal? It's just like our crew running away from things, from foes. But I also really loved The Last Jedi, and I think it does a similar thing that this movie does, which is fundamentally shifting the philosophy of the world and introducing new rules of the universe, which is key to feeling like we're not just wandering. It's actually our world has expanded and is now very different from where we were at the beginning of the movie.
So yeah, I do agree that The Last Jedi did definitely shift the tone. And I actually do like Last Jedi a lot. I felt like it was building onto something, and I thought there was a way to build onto it. And I talk about this a lot when I talk about Rise of Skywalker.
That's what that movie's called.
It is what this movie is called.
That was a nightmare.
It was that's one of the worst ones. But yeah. I had a thought, like, because if you watch the first one to the second one, I thought they were building
of the sequels. You mean, or
of the sequels? Of the sequels. Sorry.
Okay. No.
If you watch 7, 8, 9, I thought they were building to a point where you were going to have non-force sensitive people be like,
"Yes,
we're tired of Jedi Sith.
Yeah.
Let's just kill them all.
Let's just blow it all up." And I was like, yeah.
And I also wanted the double switch. I wanted Rey to go bad and Kylo to go good.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't want that. But I was a Reylo shipper, but that's another can of worms altogether.
But to have them flip and...
But I was still mad at that whole thing. It's fine. We'll have to come back and talk about The Last Jedi at some point.
That would be really fun, actually. Because there's so much there.
But... Because
yeah, go ahead.
The problem was, because if you go back and rewatch The Force Awakens, right? Because obviously when it came out, it was a huge deal because Star Wars. But like, if you go back and watch it, it's basically A New Hope. It's like a love letter to A New Hope and to Star Wars in general, which is great. It's not bad, but it's just it's mid in my opinion. I would say Force Awakens.
Yeah.
And that was J.J. Abrams. And then we switched over to Last Jedi with Rian Johnson, and he was just like, let me flip the Monopoly board and make some real choices here. Like, really interesting choices. Let's shake it up a little bit, and let's keep the people guessing, which is, I think, in a lot of ways, like you were saying, is similar to Empire in that, like, it just amped everything up. And then... the problem is, well, in the original, we went from that to Return of the Jedi, which also did ramp stuff up, but also concluded everything in a nice little bow, which was nice. In, what was it called again?
The Rise of Skywalker.
The Rise of Skywalker. That was J.J. Abrams saying, what did you do to my perfect trilogy that I was trying to do? I'm going to retcon everything you did and just jam 2 movies worth of stuff into one movie that is essentially just like a clip show of a movie. Like, we can't settle on one scene long enough before we jump to the next scene, and they're all terrible. Oh, and by the way, let's give Chewie a medal. Like, that's the movie, and it's really irritating. And thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I love it. And also, by the way, we're gonna like satisfy every Reddit theory desire known to man, and just like hang all of our little ornaments in our Christmas tree that don't make sense, but like you get your satisfying, ending that you wanted of like this tiny small side plot. So yeah, not great. Not great. And I wonder do we feel like Empire is so strong in part because we know where Return of the Jedi goes next, and we can now see how like Empire leads so perfectly. It sets up some of those threads. Like if, for example, Return of the Jedi did something different and kind of does what kind of the sequels does that change how we think about Empire? I would argue yes. Like Empire is helped by the way that Return of the Jedi wraps in an incredibly strong way. Because I think we see the reverse of, I think The Last Jedi could be even greater had Rise of Skywalker been strong to complement it well,
Right. I get what you're saying. Because, I mean, yeah, with the sequels, none of them really they weren't working together, the movies.
Yeah.
So it's just, they were working against each other. So that's why it was such a jumbled mess. The prequels, say what you want about the prequels, but at least they were cohesive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for better or worse, they were cohesive. With the originals, yeah, I mean, they very perfectly weave into each other. It's a true trilogy where one very perfectly leads into the other and so on. I think because with a lot of sequels, with a lot of movies that make sequels and trilogies and whatnot, like sometimes you run the risk of them all being a very separate story and like basically just a retread of the original every time. So yeah, I think this trilogy in general, the original Star Wars trilogy, is like the perfect example of what a movie trilogy should be and like the purpose of a movie trilogy. Because now they make sequels, dime a dozen because money, but they don't really need them necessarily. With the Star Wars trilogy, you really need to, like, they all just go together very swiftly and easily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think like Empire on its own is a good movie. Like we've already talked about all of the things that it does well, from production to screenwriting to the performance, like everything, the music. Oh my God. Like it is a good movie. And then like I feel like it's the cherry on top is when you view the entire trilogy together, I think you see like another level of just how good it is. So I think it's kind of one of those both and kind of situations where it's a good movie on its own, and then it's made even better when you put it in that larger context of the trilogy.
Yeah, there's only a handful of movies that I feel like do sequels so well that you kind of can't separate them. And it's like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings.
I knew you were going to say Lord of the Rings.
And then arguably, well, The Godfather Part 1 and 2.
Yeah, we don't talk about Godfather 3.
It doesn't exist in my world. I'm like, they never made a third movie. That's the world I live in.
It never happened. It's not real.
Do not acknowledge.
But like, it's so unbelievable when you watch New Hope into Empire into, yes, you are completely right that they do flow well into each other and it satisfies a lot. Yeah, if Return of the Jedi bombed and it was a horrible movie, would it have affected Empire? Probably.
Yeah, in the long run, sure.
But Empire is such a movie where we just sat and just watched Empire, and it was great. I love just sitting there and watching Empire. I've done it. I've watched Empire on random TV channels when it's popped up, and you don't need the other two. So as great as it is in the trilogy, I think it just elevates the fact that it doesn't need it as well.
And it's so rewatchable too. Like, man, this movie probably made a killing on like TV and when they would just like show movies, because you can pop it on at I think almost any point and you'd be like, oh my gosh, it's this scene. I'm going to sit and I'm going to watch this. And you just get sucked in because there's so so many iconic moments in this, and you just want to hang out with your pals. You want to see what Han and Leia and Chewie are up to, and go flying through space. Like, that's just, it's such a good time and such a high rewatchability. So obviously, like, technically it's very good, but then because it's so rewatchable, then it was able to become such a cultural thing that is still relevant and iconic and quoted 45 years later. Like, that's something really, really special. And I think that that's a good combination of that, like, technical proficiency and it's just complete rewatchability.
It's very quotable too. We found ourselves catching the quote before it came out of the character's mouth and like yelling it across the room.
Who are you calling scruffy looking?
You could use a good kiss.
I love you. I know.
Oh my god. That is so... Bro, if you ever said that to me... if you ever did me like that...
It's so good, though.
I love that he changed it too in the moment. Harrison Ford, I almost called him Han Solo. Harrison Ford was like, yeah, I don't think Han would just say I love you too. I'm going to just say what I want to say. And then he kept it in the movie.
Perfect.
I think that's hilarious. It's very Harrison Ford. And it's funny because you catch them in interviews all the time. Like, you'll see an old video of like the trio there being interviewed in some talk show. And they'll be like, so what's with this world that George Lucas has created? And they're just like laughing and embarrassed by some of the dialogue they have to say. But it's just, they're just like, yeah, but it's how we pay the bills. So we're going to just say the words.
I think there were so many more like little details that I feel like I noticed more on this more recent viewing. Watching it again now, it's like 7 years after seeing it from a long time ago. One of the things, like, just little tiny things where I was like, wow, this is on point. The way, for example, that Vader's red saber slowly emerges versus Luke's blue saber eagerly, like, is like immediately, like, he's like ready, and kind of showcasing the delta between Luke's kind of greenness to this world and like his over eagerness and overconfidence to fight. And Vader's just like this all powerful. He doesn't need to like have his saber show up quickly. It's this like slow, all powerful, like, I've got you, little one. Like, let's not play. And then later as that sequence is fun, because we've seen a gajillion lightsaber fight sequences at this point, and people rank them and whatnot. But I thought it was so fascinating seeing the way that Vader fights over the course of that fight sequence that lasts actually a long time, and it's intercut with some of the Han and Leia moments, but his fighting slowly crescendos to becoming more and more aggressive as the fight progresses. But at the beginning, he's a lot more calm and kind of like just grounded, but as he's feeling more of that anger and frustration, the way he physically fights is different. And I thought that was just really great because they could have had the fight start really big and explosive and flashy, like I think we do in the later movies. But the understanding of the slow crescendo and the simplicity of that, I thought was so well done. And so those are some of the things that I feel like now seeing a lot of the more modern movies and whatnot and the way this could have been shot, the simplicity and the detail-oriented nature of this movie, I just am more impressed by catching a lot of those little things.
Well, yeah, because they always talk about how Siths, like, they get stronger as they get more angry. So yeah, it is a nice way to kind of show that. Like, Vader is very calm in the beginning, and like, even when you see certain things, like, as they're fighting, Luke gets a hit on Vader in their fight, and he immediately, like, almost goes into a rage and starts, like, swinging down. That's where he cuts off his hand and stuff. Like, when the rage takes over, and actually, I have to give Hayden credit when he did his role back when he took on Vader, is, like, the rage that flows through him brings him to a level that he can't control.
He does better in Revenge of the Sith. In the second one, he comes off like a petulant little baby. He's like,
yeah, the second movie is rough.
I want to be on the council. It's like, okay, sweetie. Calm down.
Well, again, I think that's also being a young, inexperienced actor
Yeah.
with again,
Sure, yeah.
and I think when you, especially if you throw in like Clone Wars, the show.
I mean, yeah, he's had a full. I mean, now Star Wars fans are like, yeah, Hayden Christensen. I feel like there was a time where everybody, meaning like Star Wars fans, generally hated that guy because they're like, you ruined Darth Vader. Now they're like, yay, Vader's back, and it's like, okay, Anakin.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think same thing with Jake Lloyd. I think he got a rough.
He did.
A rough go because of Phantom Menace, and that's not really his fault. He was a kid. But yeah, I think in general, like, Vader is the hardest. Vader is a really hard character to personalize, which is what the prequels was trying to do. And that's hard because, I mean, in the original trilogy, he's just a big scary guy in a big black cloak and a big scary helmet with a laser sword. Like, you know, it's hard to make that guy like cute and cuddly.
And Vader is just so imposing in this movie too. And I loved that. Like, you can feel his presence. Like, he just like wafts into the room. And of course he has this giant cape that's flowing behind him, which just makes it so dramatic. But I love how ominous of a figure he is. And I think that the film uses that really well all throughout. And just the times that we get to see him, and then you see him, you know, choking out his staff members or whatever. Or I love that, like, when he comes into a room, sometimes he has other people coming in first, so you can see his like entourage and like, oh my gosh, something big is coming. And just that sense of fear. And it's not just that, you know, this evil force of the Empire is coming, but we have this personification of that evil force in Vader, and it's just utilized so well.
It is. It even is like little things, like even when you go back to New Hope, like Obi-Wan talks about, I feel Vader's force. I feel his presence. Luke says it in this where he's like, I can feel Vader. So like, while you have all those moments where it's like, oh, he walks in, he's this imposing force because you can see it, the characters know this even when he's not there on screen. So it is a well done job to put that in the audience's minds even before he shows up. So, yeah.
I'm trying to think.
I just love that this film also indulges in getting to give, for us as a viewers, to get to see Vader just like Taylor Swift strut. Like, there's so many sequences where he's just walking down hallways and I'm like eating it up, and I'm like, I can't wait for the next time I get to see him just
I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, and the film knows that we love that, you know. And I think someone mentioned at one point the pacing. I thought that it felt so right every time we would cut from one team to Vader, back to our team, back to Vader. And I think like in the later films, there's a lot more of that cutting and it feels a little bit more chaotic, but this one almost felt like, okay, like that beat was done and it's come to fruition and I'm ready for the next beat, and it gives us the next beat at the right time versus almost too soon or too late. Like, I never felt like we were dwelling too long in any one place, and the curiosity was like, what's happening over there? And the film would usher that in the right moment. I think that intuition this film has helps it really have that forward momentum instead of us feeling like, okay, like I'm done with being on this planet. Like, can we go now? You know, like, I want to see more of the world now. What's happening with our other friends? Yeah, that pacing is so spot on, hard to nail.
Well, yeah, the editing is great in this movie. It is wonderful to like cutting in between. You are 100% right there. But even just like little character things, like Frankie mentioned how she wanted Hoth to end a little earlier, like the Battle of Hoth. But there's stuff in there that's so quintessential to like Leia's character. Like, she's the last one to leave the base. Like, she's like, get everybody else out of here. We're working through this. Let's go. Let's like.
Yeah, sure. She's running shit, and we love that for her. We love a strong, independent woman.
But like, she does this and she does that so well. And then like other little things, like she's the first one to question Lando. Like she's the like even
Our boy Lando with his cape. Speaking of capes,
It's majestic.
Oh, it
Yes,
is.
you work
Scott
that
wanted
cape,
to invest
buddy.
in a cape. I'm like, babe, you can't pull it off. You are not Lando. But yeah, he was great. Like the fact that he was in I don't know if you guys have seen the Han Solo prequel with, I can't remember
Oh,
his name,
yes.
Alden Ehrenreich. And you
Oh.
can tell when you see Lando in this movie and he like does his like smiles and like, you know, his his Lando-esque things, you can see like Donald Glover in there like in the past, and it's like, oh yeah, that's good. That was like the best casting choice ever.
there's again so many little things, so many things you can just take from this. Like, yeah, if you wanted to just focus on like Han and sometimes his reckless decision making that somehow seems to work out, I do love every time after C-3PO tells him the odds the first time, he's like, never tell me the odds, and then he tries to tell him the odds a couple more times, and like Leia interrupts him.
C-3PO.
Everyone just interrupts him.
Every time that guy comes on screen, that's what people just shut up. Be quiet. Where's R2? We like him
But then
better
I
than
love
you.
how you see Chewie like got like his protector like nature comes out when C-3PO
I
is
love
in
Chewie.
danger. You know, like this crew loves each other and fights for each other. And then I just love seeing the shots of Chewie like at the ending scenes running around with his little C-3PO like backpack on.
Yeah.
It's so great. Like this crew's like chemistry together and the way that they've written these little moments of them like fighting for each other, advocating for each other, being really upset when one of them's getting like in danger or caught. Like I think all of that works really well too of this like crew that we're invested in.
And the fact that Chewie himself has so much character for just being a guy in a big dog costume that doesn't even speak English is pretty impressive.
I laughed. I don't know what it was this viewing, but I found him hilarious every time he does his screeching. Like we're in the middle of like some really intense fight sequence, and you just hear him like it's hilarious, and he's so expressive. I actually think it adds so much to every moment because he almost takes the emotions of the moment and like exaggerates them, so we as the viewers feel them more deeply. You know, it's also just so funny.
Yeah, when Han was about to get frozen in carbonite and he just starts screaming and like beating people up, I'm like, oh, his friend is about to get frozen. He's sad.
Yeah, I just wanted to give him a hug. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, buddy.
It's gonna be okay. You just gotta wait one more movie.
Yeah, you just gotta watch the next one.
Well, the fact that Han is the only one who understands him it's
He's
just
also so cute.
it just adds a nice little thing to that relationship between the two of them. You know, it did give us the fact that in the holiday special, no one could understand Wookiees. That they made a whole movie about Wookiees with no
Oh my God,
subtitles.
that's so funny.
Have you either of you seen the holiday special?
Say
the original?
No.
Please say no. Okay, don't change that. It was awful. It was terrible, but it was really funny because yes, it was a Christmas special that aired on television right after the first movie came out because, you know, very popular. And it wasn't even like a Christmas special. It was like a Wookiee, like the Wookiee version of Christmas. And it was through Chewie and his family like preparing for the holidays, and then stormtroopers raid Chewie's house. It's like it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare.
It's a nightmare. Perfect to get you in the holiday spirit.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Have some stormtroopers.
Jeez. Now we were coming on here to talk about a nice movie, and you had to bring up the Star Wars holiday special like a freak.
Well, when you talk about Star Wars, like
No,
as
you don't
much as
have to bring that up.
you not that movie, but you kind of just go off into the tangents
Yeah.
of the universe.
It's so
yeah,
true.
no, that's fine. But not that one. That's not canon.
And I love that all of our tangents have been like, and then this other movie, but like this movie doesn't do as well as this movie. Like every movie we're just like, and yet if you compare it to Empire, it don't work as well as Empire, you know?
No. Yeah.
This is the gold standard that we're holding up all these other things to. It's so funny.
Oh well, yeah. There's a reason that everybody always goes like, "Hey, the original trilogy is like the gold standard of Star Wars," because everyone who's seen these movies loves these movies. But now you're seeing kind of like a resurgence of like the prequels, because a lot of the people who that was their first Star Wars, they love those movies, and they're like, you kind of get the resurgence of that through Clone Wars, the Ahsoka series, and like that. So I wonder in like 10, 15 years if it will be the sequel trilogy that all those kids who grew up on that.
Maybe to an extent. I don't know.
You know.
Because, yeah, I mean, when they came out, I guess the prequels were pretty badly panned, as were the sequel. Well, the sequels were so mixed, I feel like. So, I don't know.
Yeah. I think my theory is that I think The Last Jedi will be viewed more favorably as time passes. I feel like at the moment it was so divisive. You had your like super fans and you had your like haters of that movie. And I think it's just because it was revolutionary. It was breaking down so much of the lore of this world. And I feel like newer generations, as also like our like mindsets are shifting around more like forward thinking ideas and willingness to like relook at like parts of our past that were not good and not healthy. You know, like I think like The Last Jedi will be received more favorably by like fresh new audiences, new generations, versus I mean, you have people that like grew up on the iconic films, and so that the feeling of threatening that is hard to accept in the moment. But I will be fascinated to see how The Last Jedi will evolve in its reception.
Yeah, I think so. I think The Force Awakens has kind of dowered in like since it's come out. Like people are looking at it as maybe like is more okay than like amazing 5 out of 5 best Star Wars movie ever, because the hype has died down a little bit. And then you're right, when it went totally left with Last Jedi, a lot of people were like up in arms about it just because of like the shock of it all. But yeah, I think in time, you know, it'll soften a little bit. And then Rise of Skywalker, it will never be good.
No.
It will always be trash. But that's okay. So will Phantom Menace.
Hey, this is pod racing.
My God. That's why anyone who thinks Phantom Menace is good outside of like Duel of Fates, get out of here. Go away. It's just an hour and a half of sand and then a cool fight, and then that's it. Like, that's all there is.
Scott, where do you land on the spectrum of The Last Jedi? I know Frankie's a fan and liked it.
I did like The Last Jedi. I thought it was a well-made movie. I think Rian Johnson is a good director, and I think he knew that. Okay, so 7. Which one was 7? 7 was
Force
Force
Awakens.
Awakens, yeah, 8.
Force Awakens, I think, was the hard reset they wanted for this new universe. So I think that, okay, so like we got the hard reset, and I think Rian Johnson's like, okay, now we have that. Now let's turn everything on its head. Let's as Frankie said in this, and I think you guys have said it too, we want to change what the audience expects. Because if we just did Empire again, people would be like, it's just Empire again.
Yeah, because I think the first one, Force Awakens, I think being very similar to New Hope was okay, because it's been so long at that point since we've had Star Wars. Everyone just needed to know, like, okay, we're can do it. It's okay. We got it. Look what we did. Look how nice it is. See, we can do it. It's going to be okay. And then after that, we're like, all right, let's do some cool shit. And some people were like, no, I'm scared.
But I think I liked the direction. I kind of, again, this is the one thing I do wish we did, is either we had JJ do all 3 movies, or we had Ryan Abrams and
Ryan Johnson.
J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson and then whoever happened to be the third director sit down in the room and actually just go, okay,
Mm.
boom, this is where we're going, and then he comes in,
Yeah.
and it's just the plan. And
They need to
sometimes
plan it out.
Disney especially seems very reactionary when they do these big projects, that they're like, oh, people didn't like this, let's just change course completely. Instead of like letting it breathe, they're very much like in the moment, oh, they don't like this, we'll give them something different. We have a friend who does another podcast, an Oscar podcast, where he's like, I feel like you can't evaluate a year for movies until like 5 years after that movie has come out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good rule, that like you
Just
don't
let it breathe a little
Yeah.
bit in the pop culture and human consciousness. Just let it breathe for a minute. And that makes sense.
Mhm.
Or like you were saying, Scott, like have a plan. Like have
Yeah.
something that you want to say and come in with a coherent plan for how to say that, and that will also help. And then if you need to react and change some things, you can, but you already have a structure and a plan, and everybody's on board, so you have a cohesive unit and a cohesive set of movies like the original trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. You know,
And I think that's one of the other things that is, I think really great about Empire, is that thematically it is setting up, by giving us a little bit, not too much, of this like reconciliation that is coming in the final third movie. You know, like we don't really even know how it's going to play out, but you see for a moment in that conversation between Vader and Luke this side of Vader that we've never seen before. He's relating in a way with his son that we don't he's giving orders for like most of the time. You know, he's being scary and he's giving orders, but there's this like hopefulness, this like vision, this dream that he's trying to sell, and there's kind of this softer side to him in his own way through his mask, as he's like, you know, yelling at you with your arm cut off. But it's setting up this side of him that we've never seen before. Even that shot there's this very brief, this shot of Vader putting his helmet on, and we just see the back of his head. This is like his bare head. That like vulnerability of him is being set up thematically that again then gets to pay off. But like those wheels have started turning in this movie that we get to fully realize in the third one. I thought like those little things too, just that holistic way of thinking about the pacing and preparing audiences' hearts for whatever might be next is, yeah, like you said, the having a plan and seeing the holistic arc would have really helped the sequels.
well, yeah, like George Lucas wrote New Hope and did New Hope because he didn't expect to have another movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was like, this is going to be it. No one expects this to succeed, and it became the biggest thing in the world. But after New Hope, he had a plan for like, I think 10 movies.
Yeah, something like that, right?
So like,
Wild.
as crazy as he is, you know, he had a huge plan with all these things kind of working together. And like, did he make mistakes? Of course he did. You know,
Jar Jar.
Jar Jar, casting a 9-year-old as Anakin Skywalker. Which,
Yippee!
like there are
Dialogue.
When the most evil villain in the world
says yippee, yes.
says yippee, we're off track. We're off somewhere in outer space, ironically enough.
But even people will talk about, like, in Return of the Jedi, like, the Ewoks are kind of just there to sell toys.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But weirdly, I liked the Ewoks more. I don't know why, I just did. Maybe I'm being tricked by their cuteness. I liked them more than, you know,
So, like,
some other stuff.
It's one of those things, like, you're like, okay, I get it. But, you know, what would it have been if George Lucas got to do 7, 8, 9, possibly 10?
That's insane to think about.
Like, I don't know. But he also course corrected. Like, if you watch the prequels, Jar Jar's part gets less and less each movie.
Oh, yeah. Well, because he got such terrible backlash that he's like, wait, we can't do this anymore. The kids aren't liking him like we thought.
To the point where in the game, he's actually frozen in carbonite in one of the games.
Oh, poor guy.
I just see his face and his like bulging eyes in my head. overly eager. It's too much energy.
Jeez.
Those eyes could give you nightmares in your sleep.
Yo, really though.
Misa?
And the voice.
Misa
And the
give you
voice.
nightmares? No.
Um,
Oh God.
Man, so much to talk about. It's cool to see the way we like can go off on the and like just think about Empire, especially in the context of the larger Star Wars universe, and just how well it does and how wrong it can go, and kind of comparing. And I think it helps the appreciation for this film just deepen even more to see how difficult it was for this film to nail. I think it's like easy to feel like when it's right, but to know how to craft that is actually the harder task. Any other last big thoughts about Empire for now? I'm sure we could talk about this movie for hours and Star Wars for hours, as plenty of people have done. But any other last big things about Empire before we wrap?
It's nearly a perfect movie. It really is. And I've loved it from when I watched it on VHS years ago in my Darth Vader box that had the first 3 movies. I'll always love it. When we have our kids, it's probably going to be one of the first movies they watch. Yeah, it's a perfect movie for me.
You know what? I would agree. I'm not as much of a super fan of Star Wars as Scott, but as someone who was previously someone who was like, I know all the main things. Yoda's the little green guy. Darth Vader's Luke's dad, and Han and Leia are lovebirds. I got all that stuff. And, there's a weird alien guy named Jar Jar. We could have did without that guy, but yeah, I mean, I'm glad that I actually sat down and watched all the movies and, like, have the lore in my brain, and now can, go back and watch these movies and still have a great time. I think Empire is, probably the one that is the most easy to have a good time with, because there's so many, like you guys were saying, like, just iconic key moments that if you turn it on, like, at any point, pretty much, it won't be long till you hit, like, an awesome scene or an awesome bit of dialogue or an action scene or something, iconic and cool. So I can't complain. It's pretty awesome.
I just very quickly, because I don't think we've talked about this enough, we got to talk about John Williams and his incredible score. Like, this, it absolutely rocks. And I think we've talked about the pacing of the film and the editing of the film that is so good. And then there's just his incredible score that just helps develop so much of the emotion it's so perfect for this film. And it's a perfect score. It's an iconic score. And even though, we've all heard all of it before, it's just so much fun to watch this again and be immersed in that score, because it just perfectly complements everything that's happening on the screen.
To be fair, I think we do take it for granted because it's been around, like you're saying, so long. And like every Star Wars movie's got the same score pretty much. So it's like we're so used to it. But yeah, it's iconic. Not many people can say like their movie's score you can hum in your head without any prompting. And I feel like that's pretty iconic.
And somehow he takes those themes for each of the characters and makes them like musically interesting each time, which I think is also challenging. Like, there's just sometimes these hints of how much it comes through. You hear a little bit of the theme and then it like tapers out, so it's not too much every time. It's like every time we see Han and Leia together, they're not like just same theme, play it again, take the track, cut it in. That's it's a little different each time tonally, and so that all of that detail works really well. Yeah, I think that like many more action movies need to study this film better, and the way that this film balances but then also uses action and the thematic elements are like so deeply interwoven together, I think is so strong. I think, Scott, you were saying this earlier, this movie is so fun, but it's thematically so expansive and there's so much to read into and interpret differently. And so I would just love to see more movies that are like big popcorn movies also be able to balance and hold these two things at once. I think this movie does an incredible job. Just even down to the details of like Yoda being this Jedi master, and Luke thinking he's gonna get a warrior Jedi master, and it's this little green pesky guy. Like that there's so much there around like not underestimating the little guy and the power that comes in these small places, and I think all of that is so poignant and specific and thematically rich for audiences. So yeah, there's so much to love here, and I was more impressed this viewing, just the little details that it nails really well. All right.
Agreed with everything you just said.
Well, I'm sure we could rave and gush about this movie and then also rant about other Star Wars pieces of IP for so much longer. But for now, we'll wrap here. This is our review and discussion of The Empire Strikes Back. It is the 45-year anniversary. It's wild that it's been 45 years. I think that number kind of like boggles my mind a little bit. I think 45 is a long time. But yeah, you can find it available, I believe, to stream on Disney Plus and likely some other platforms as well. So thank you for listening to this week's episode of Movies and Us. And a big thank you to you both for joining. First time on the pod. So fun. It was so exciting to get to talk about this iconic movie with you both.
Yeah, it was a blast. Thank you for having us. We appreciate it so much.
Yeah, we love talking about iconic film. And maybe if there's a next time, we can talk about one of the more not so good Star Wars movies and we can watch Scott really rant.
Yes! I would love to see that because we got to see him like gush about this. It was a nearly perfect movie, and I'm excited to see.
Oh yeah, but no, he can
spicy
rant.
Hot takes for him to go in on. Ooh. Yeah.
You give me arguably my favorite movie of all time.
Yeah, I mean, what are you gonna do?
He's just glowing. He's beaming this whole episode. I can't wait to see the spice. All right, well, our name, Movies and Us, sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating review, letting us know your thoughts about The Empire Strikes Back. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Movies and Us Pod, or email us at moviesandUsPod@gmail.com. Check out our website, andusmediaco.co, for the latest on Movies and Us and our other podcast, TV and Us. We'll be back next week to discuss a 2003 film, Lost in Translation. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again with y'all very soon.